Welcome to the Road to Great Health podcast, where we're going to discuss the latest solutions, the latest natural solutions to today's worst chronic health problems. I'm Dr. Kevin Lenderman from Dr. Kevin's Wellness Clinic here in South Louisiana, and I'm fortunate to be joined by my mentor and one of the smartest doctors I know, Dr. Rob DeMartino. Doc, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh man, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
So for those of you that are a patient of mine, or you know that I go to Las Vegas 4 to 6 times a year to study and learn about Beyond Functional Medicine program, this is the guy I go to see. And I usually sit there for 3 days and he talks way over my head, but I catch some of it. That's why I keep going. But Doc, man, I'm so glad you decided to do this with me.
Now you bring in your staff, man. That's why you bring your staff to these things, right? So they can help you.
That's right. 4 brains is better than one, right? Now, for those of you, if it sounds like I'm in a construction zone, it's because I literally am. They're building condos about 20 yards that way. And so if you hear hammers and it sounds like 20 guys banging on wood, it's because that's exactly what's happening. So you're going to get both sides of the coin with us. So I'm more of a big picture kind of a guy. Dr. Rob is more of the science smart kind of guy. Dr. Rob has been known to actually reach the end of the internet in some of his research. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad to be able to bring both of these things to you guys. Now, if you've heard me talk for more than 5 minutes about patients' problems, you've heard me talk about something called energetic debt. And Dr. Rob is actually the guy who coined the term energetic debt. So that's the first topic that I want to discuss today. So Doc, let's talk a little bit about energetic debt right off the bat.
Yeah, I think it's an important one because I have spent pretty much all of my time reading research. I don't have hobbies. I don't have fun. I just basically do the science, do the research. And in the times that I'm not spending on the science and the research, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I take this really complicated science and make it into something that's easy to understand for a person who does not have a science background, right? The same way I go to my tax accountant and I trust him because he's the expert and he wants to explain tax law to me because he's very excited about it, but I don't know what he's talking about. It's how do you make it make sense in a way that just if you don't need some sort of big background and you don't have to spend your entire life trying to study and learn this stuff. So the concept of energetic debt basically comes down to the fact that most chronic problems occur and they stay chronic, meaning sometimes you get sick and then you get better and it goes away. And sometimes you get sick and then it stays there forever. And what's the delineating factor? It's how much energy is available for the body in order to be able to turn those functions on and turn them off. If you have plenty of energy, you're going to be able to solve those problems. If you don't have enough energy in the system, now your system has to compensate. It has to steal from Peter to pay Paul. And now we're stuck in a negative loop where now big systems have to take from little systems and little systems have to pull from big systems. And the body doesn't have enough energy to heal. I told a patient actually earlier today, if you had Bill Gates money, right? Or if you had Elon Musk money, right? Could you solve most of the problems in your life? And he said, absolutely, I could. And we laughed. And I was like, right. So if your body had unlimited energy, it solves most of the problems that you have. And that's just what we have to figure out is why are you not able to make enough and how can we get you to make more?
Yeah, you said that in Vegas last time. You said, you guys think about most of y'all's problems. And if I wrote you a check for $1 million today, most of those problems would get better. And that's exactly how this concept of energetic debt works. And the bottom line is your body is ran by an energy molecule called ATP. And you have to have more of it than you spend. And if you do that, you will be healthy. And when you start burning energy faster than you can make it, you're going to start developing chronic problems. And the bad thing about that is in 2025, we are burning energy at both ends like crazy.
Yeah, we are living in the most perfect scenario now to create energetic debt. And the flip side of it is too, if you ask somebody, how does your body create energy? Most people have no idea, right? So we don't know the rules of the game. We don't know how to make energy. We're expending it like wild. And it's not always malicious bad stuff. Sure. Does eating bad cost energy? Of course it does. Does smoking? Yeah, of course, all these bad choices. But there's a lot of choices that we don't necessarily consider bad, that steal tremendous amount of energies from us. And the only reason people are doing them is because no one's told them not to.
Right.
And then you end up in a
And
scenario where you're in trouble for just because it's our job as doctors to be able to give this information over, and we're doing a bad job at it.
And the way I put this to patients too is and I date myself a little bit by saying it this way, but imagine you go out to your mailbox expecting your paycheck to be in there. And I know nobody gets their paycheck mailed to them anymore, but just pretend like we still did that.
Yes.
And you open your mailbox and it's 2 inches thick of bills that you weren't expecting. And so you go out the next day expecting maybe my paycheck's in, and it's 2 more inches of bills. And this happens day after day after day. Your bank account would very quickly be in trouble. And that's what's happening in the energy system in your body in 2025. And that's why I rarely talk to a patient that doesn't tell me that they're low energy, that they've been fatigued, and they've been that way for a while.
Sure. I mean, there's no chronic health problem where the person comes in and says, "Oh, I have all the energy in the world." That's not a problem. I don't have fatigue. Like those two things don't really go together. And just to talk about like the actual ideology of ATP. I mean, you're talking about a teeny, teeny, tiny thing inside of your system, and your body. If you're a 150-pound person, you'll make on average about 175 pounds of ATP a day, and that's if you're fairly sedentary. Right. So when you think about the sheer amount of this chemical that the body has to make in order to try to power everything inside of the body, it's almost ununderstandable. Right. So we're already kind of riding that line pretty close at this point. And then we do all these other things. And next thing you know, we're in debt pretty quickly.
Exactly. And so the key to Dr. Rob's program and the way that we have been able to help so many patients between him and I with all types of just different chronic conditions is the first step is you got to fix the energy system. Then you can fix everything else, because what happens in the body. So if it's time to pay your bills and times are tight, you don't have enough money to pay all your bills. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to prioritize. You're going to pay the rent so you have a place to live. You're going to pay the electric bill. So because it's hot, especially in Vegas and Louisiana, we need our air conditioning. But Starbucks, that's going to wait. The cable bill, well, if they cut that off, you're still okay. This is what your body does in this state of energetic debt. Your body will literally do heart and lungs, give that some energy. Digestion, we can't quite do that this month. Hormones, first thing to cut off. Reproduction is not important. I'm barely getting by. Libido, are you kidding? I'm barely paying heart and lungs. You want me to pay libido?
Yeah, that's for fun.
That's
just for fun.
Not life essential.
Nope.
And this is what we see over and over and over again in our practices.
Yeah, actually, the ideology of energetic debt came from when I was watching reality TV with my wife, and we were watching these shows where they fix businesses. And every business that they go into, no matter what business it is, it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant, it doesn't matter if it's a bar, it doesn't matter if it's a hotel, if it's a hair salon one, they're all exactly the same. Right? The first thing they do is they put a cash influx into the business. Then they clean up their books, and then they optimize their systems. And I think the reason that I like those shows after a while is because I just started to see the overlap. I'm like, this is kind of what we do every single day, right? Yeah. We're just sitting here. We're basically... And we're not even just putting energy into the system, which is the coolest part. You're putting energy in, yes, but you're also then fixing the body's ability to make it on its own, right? So there's no dependency there. I tell patients, my job is to obsolete myself in your world. My job is to get you well and get you out of here. The reason people always, it's an odd thing, right? Because now we're all conditioned to think, oh, well, I can get in there pretty quickly with him. He must not be great, right? If you go into an empty restaurant, the first thought is the food's not very good, right? So you come into a doctor's office and all of a sudden it's not like a 6-month waiting list and like, okay, we'll get you in within a couple of weeks. We'll get you in, kind of soon enough. And we're making it work because obviously usually the people who call us have pretty significant problems. But the reason that you constantly have to wait 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months to get to doctors is because guess what? Nobody graduates. Nobody's better. The roster doesn't get smaller. They just get more and more patients under care, and they're just getting overwhelmed. I'm like, I can take 8 more people this month because I graduated 8 people, right? Because I expected them, in the timeline, okay, we're going to get better, or we can see them less, or whatever that may look like, and then we can bring them in. Right. So, but that mentality, I think really what has to happen is people have to understand that the system isn't broken. The medical system is not broken. It's working exactly as they intended to, which is to keep you in it.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
If you say, name a chronic disease they've cured in the last 50 years ago.
Yeah, you got it.
I wish I had a cricket sound effect,
Right,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I need to play the crickets. Yeah.
It's a zero.
There's no such thing. Right.
And believe me, as I sit here, I tell you guys, I've said this many times, you've heard me say it a gajillion times, the only thing I care about is results, right? So if tomorrow the pharmaceutical company created a pill that cured a disease that didn't have any sorts of side effects that killed you later on, or caused your arms to fall off, or whatever horrible side effects that they have, if they created any of that stuff, I would be the first one on board. But the reality is that that's illogical science. That's not going to be the way that this works.
Right. Exactly. And what we're getting at here is mitochondrial dysfunction. And it's funny. I had one of my radio shows. I was talking about mitochondrial dysfunction one time, and after I was done, I got back to my office. I had a medical doctor call me, just furious at me talking about that, saying, these mitochondrial diseases are genetic and they're rare and they almost never happen, and you have no right to be talking about them. I'm talking about mitochondrial dysfunction. Mm-hmm. And so now, if that were Dr. Rob, he probably could have cited 17 studies and the authors and when they came out to kind of prove his point. But so I just asked the guy, I said, so the mitochondria make energy, right? Yes. So would you agree that almost every patient has energy problems? Yes. So explain that to me. And again, it was crickets.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about here is your energy system of your body physically is not working right. So this is not some kind of out in left field kind of gypsy hippie kind of weird kind of, woo-woo thing. This is your energy system is broken, and that's what leads to chronic disease, because patients always think, I have these diagnoses and that's causing me to be low energy. It's the reverse. The energy problem is leading to your diagnoses, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's 100%. That's actually really well said. I might steal that, but that's actually exactly what that is.
Yeah,
that's the way it works. And again, don't get me wrong. There are hardwired genetic disorders of both DNA and mitochondria, and those do exist. He's not wrong in that aspect of it, but the other side of it definitely exists. And I think this is such an important distinction, because I'll never forget years ago, I have little kids, you do too. And my son was around 8 or 9 at the time, and he was sitting in the back of the car with me. And he said, Dad, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He says, how do you fix some of these problems? How do you help some of these problems that nobody else can fix? He's like, what makes you so unique? And I was like, well, that's a pretty good question for a 9-year-old. And I'm sure if he has it, other people have it as well. So I thought for a second, and I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, think of it this way. In the medical world, they believe, they are taught, we are all taught, that all diseases come from a certain part of your cell. So your cell has lots of different parts. For our purposes, we're going to talk about 2. There's the nucleus of your cell that has your DNA in it. That's the DNA that you get from your mom, and that's the DNA that you get from your dad, right? That's the part that medical doctors are taught, and all the research tells them this is where the disease is coming from. The other side of this, which is the newer side of things, right? We're talking within the last 40 years, but really within the last 20 years, we discovered that there's mitochondria in your cells, and we've known that they were in there, but now the mitochondria have their own set of DNA. Now, they didn't even know that until about 25 years ago, that the mitochondria has its own set of DNA. And we know now pretty definitively that the cause of disease doesn't come from this part of the cell, not the nucleus. It comes from the mitochondrial DNA getting damaged. Now, again, if you search these random diseases, that's not going to come up as the first listed of things, because, the internet is a bit biased on that side. But if you ask that specifically, it will come up. And it will come up with every disease that is chronic, that's autoimmune, or whatever is going to show up. So I told him, I was like, well, the simple thing is they think it's this. So all of their treatments are designed to treat this. And no matter how many right treatments you do at the wrong target, it will never work. So what we do is we treat this. And when this gets better, because that actually is what science says causes the problem, which, by the way, this is why they tell you we don't know what causes it, because they can't prove that it's from this, right? They think it's from this, but they can't prove it. And everything that they've done to treat it in the last 50 years doesn't work. We know it's from this, from the science. I said, so we just don't treat this, we treat this part. And he's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. That makes total sense why you're able to do it. I was like, well, I should probably make a video about that and put it on my website, because that's a question as well. And so it goes to the point of you talking to that doctor. It's where that disconnect comes from.
Exactly. And I mean, if a kid can understand that, you would think the general scientific community could understand that. But they've spent so much time and energy and money focused on this one thing, it would collapse the system if they just completely decided to change course and do something totally different. It would, I mean, there's just too much at stake for them to change course now and do something totally different like what we do. Now, Doc, talk a little bit about the mitochondria coming from actually bacteria and how all of that came about, and that then, of course, what antibiotics do to the mitochondria.
So at some point, and there's different theories about this, but what we know for sure is at some point, the level of oxygen on Earth went from very, very low to very, very high. And if you know anything about bacteria, bacteria does not like oxygen. It does not survive in an oxygen-rich environment. That's like when you were kids, and or maybe your kids now, you do the science project where you swab your phone or you swab the toilet and then you put it on a petri dish and then you put it away. You can't have that exposed to oxygen if it's going to culture any kind of bacteria, right? It has to be sealed tight. No oxygen can get to it because oxygen is toxic to bacteria. So when the oxygen level went really, really high, bacteria wasn't able to survive. So it created this symbiotic event where two bacteria essentially joined forces so that they could utilize oxygen and not have it kill it. But in doing that, it created a significantly greater amount of energy output, which then eventually became us, that we evolved into these higher functioning, higher powered beings. Now, the problem with that is this is the greatest partnership in the history of the world, right? Our mitochondria, those bacteria, working inside us independently to create energy that we can use to run all of our functions. But they are still bacteria by their nature. So when you take an antibiotic, an antibacterial medication, by its nature, it is going to damage your mitochondria and it is going to damage mitochondrial DNA. It has to. There's no other way around it. So we can kill infections, but you're also going to have some collateral effect damage towards that. So lots of my patients will be like, oh, doc, I didn't tell you, but I got to sign this thing. I just grabbed some antibiotics quick and I'm cool. No, we're not, right? That's going to damage your mitochondria. And that's why we have these conversations in the front end. Like, you got to tell me what you're going to do. You can't do that stuff because it'll solve one problem. But now all of a sudden we just tanked our energy system.
Yeah. And at the same time, about 10 or 15 years ago, there was all this talk about the overuse of antibiotics. And medical doctors are starting to talk about trying to reduce antibiotic use. That has gone out the window.
Yeah.
I don't hear, they're back to prescribing antibiotics for knee pain. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, doc, I don't take antibiotics. But do you realize that if I took all of the antibiotics prescribed by medicine, so every antibiotic any medical doctor has prescribed, and I put it in a pile, it would be bigger than this building. That's 20%. 80% of the antibiotics go into our food and agriculture. So if you've eaten, you have gotten antibiotics in your system. So it's not just that you don't take antibiotics. That's bad enough. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's become a pervasive problem. And for a while, they were really talking about that all of these antibiotic resistant strains of infection was going to bankrupt the healthcare system. And that was when they, at the time, a handful of years ago, they were talking about trying to limit that down. But we just don't see that. And that's why you get into this idea of, well, why didn't my doctor, right? I get that question every day. Why didn't my doctor tell me this? Why did my doctor do this? And it's literally down to the sides of, this is the way that we're taught. Like we don't learn anything about mitochondrial DNA. We don't learn anything about mitochondria being a portion of it. There isn't these two sides of it. And there is no medication for mitochondria, right? There's no surgery for it. There's no medication for it. And not only is there no medication for it, there's no medication in the pipeline. They're not researching any medication to try to solve this problem because, like you said, if they did figure it out and they have to admit, hey, it's this and not that, it would collapse the system. And then on top of that, the meds that they do use usually make the problem worse, but they bandage the symptoms.
Yeah. And so how many mitochondria do we have in each cell?
So you got to figure the average cell has somewhere probably in the nature between 3,000 and 5,000 mitochondria inside of them, right? So you have about 37 trillion cells, give or take. And you got to figure that on the average end, maybe you got 4,000 per cell. I mean, you're talking about quintillion amounts, like not understandable amount of mitochondria, but put it this way, your dry body weight, 30% of it would be mitochondria.
Wow.
That's a tremendous amount inside of your system. They are important parts of our health.
And again, in 2025, we are in the perfect storm to damage mitochondria. And so talk about some of the top things, and we're going to get into each one of these subjects individually on future podcasts. But I mean, I know everything from, EMF to poor food to the antibiotics to blue light, all of those things we're going to talk about in future podcasts. But we are living in the perfect storm to damage mitochondria. That's why everybody you talk to wishes they had more energy.
Yeah. And even the people who have a lot of energy would take more. Right, like I have a truckload of energy, and if you ask me if I would want more, I would say absolutely I would. Right, but I'm also very cautious and know the rules of the game, and I'm always trying to build my ability to make energy on a mitochondrial level. Right, the cool part about this is you can get these back. Right, they can be damaged, they can be repaired, you can get them back. You again just have to know the rules of the game of ultimately how you do that, which no one's ever really talked about, but. There's so many things stressing our system right now, and I think the top portions of these. Definitely talking about things like man-made EMF, cell phones, Wi-Fi, 5G towers, Wi-Fi in the house, all microwaves, all of those things are just atrocious towards you. Talk to a patient this morning, they're flight attendants. Aside from getting chemo and radiation, the most amount you get from radiation is flying, right? And when I told her that, she was like, wait, all my problems started after I started this job. No, I know. That's why I brought it up, because that's why I asked these things, as to where it is. And like you said, blue light and the imbalance of light in our life, where they say 93% of the light that we get is alien to us, right? From indoor lighting and fake lighting, even these lights that we have shining on us right now in order to get this information out to everybody. These things, we're not designed for them. We're not designed. There's nothing, food can change, all of that stuff changes, but we are not designed for this kind of damage. And what I think is really important in the distinction about, is this a food-based problem or anything else like that? You have to understand, mitochondria, when we're talking about damage to them, we are physically talking about structural damage. So they are engines that create energy, right? Just like a car engine. They do need fuel, right? Food does play a role as fuel, as do some other things that we'll talk about later on. But for most people, and I'm going to tell you the number is probably about 66%, most of the people have a structural problem with their engine. So no one has their check engine light come on and think to themselves, oh man, I got to go to the gas station and buy more expensive gasoline. For 2/3 of the people with mitochondrial problems, it doesn't matter how well you eat, the fuel will never fix a damaged engine. Now, that doesn't mean that food's not important, right? If you have a premium engine, you want to put premium fuel in it. But if you have an engine that's fine, there are those groups of people that get mad at me on the internet. They're like, well, he said food's not important, and I fixed mine with food. There's a group of people, maybe 30% of them or so, that just are putting in the wrong fuel. And I tell all of them, that's great. You should try that before you get to me. But if you're in one of that group that I've tried every diet, I've tried all the different supplements, I've done all these things, all of the fuel in the world is not going to fix a broken engine.
Right.
And that's a huge distinction when you talk about that.
And patients get frustrated about that because they go from supplement to, and by the way, when he says food, he also means supplements. Mm-hmm. A supplement is to supplement your food. So food and supplements are in that same 20 to 30% category of people that can help themselves. But the vast majority of people just get stuck. They go from supplement to supplement to supplement, finding that next big TikTok thing that says it's going to help them, and they get frustrated. And then they just go, well, I'm just this way. Yep. Or I just got this because mom had it, and it's just genetic and there's nothing I can do. And the real thing is you just haven't found the pathway to fix your energy system. And then after that's fixed, figure out the next steps to actually get your chemistry and your organs and your biology working again so that you can live a permanently better life.
It's not that stuff is not important. It's just further down the totem pole of what's going to really move the needle for most people. Right. And I think that's where they get stuck, and that's the frustration. And even early in my career, I have people coming in and saying, oh, I have all these health problems and I changed my diet. And then I'm sitting there going, you're going to tell them, oh, you need to change your diet a different way. And that's what's going to make the difference. Right. It's one of the 30,000 registered diets in the US. Meanwhile, they're sitting there and their spouse eats terrible, drinks, smokes, and they're fine, right? And everybody knows somebody who does all those things. So what makes them get away with it? Well, if you have enough energy in the system, guess what? If you want to go in Vegas and you want to gamble and you got Elon Musk money and you want to bet $1 billion on one hand of cards, if you lose it, you still got like $270 billion left, right? Doesn't put you into debt. I don't know the spouse, but I can tell you they're making enough energy that they can pay for a bad decision, right? That's really how you get bulletproof. You want to get bulletproof, you make sure that your body can make enough energy and it's more than what you're expending.
Right. Yeah. You know, that's like we hear the story of, well, my grandpa, he lived to 95 and he smoked and drank every day. Well, he was probably also outside every day. He touched the earth every day. He didn't have a blue light phone. He had never seen a cubicle. He was outside in the sunrise every morning. You know, he did all those steps to where he could afford doing that and it didn't touch him. Somebody today try to do that, they wouldn't make it 5 years.
Yeah, because we don't.
And that's the difference.
We don't think about the fact of it's this. We would never have these conversations if we didn't live the way that we did, right? Like we changed, right? We're designed for 500 years ago. We're not designed for this. And our physiology is definitely not caught up. So a lot of these things have to have the conversations. You have to actually think about these things. They weren't meant to be thought about because they weren't there 500 years ago.
Right. Even 50 years ago. Yeah, you know, we've only had light switches for 100 years.
Yeah, I know.
We've only had blue screens on our phone for 50 years.
Right.
And our brain has developed over millennia for us to be on Earth. And it's like now we've gotten transported to some alien planet, to our body, to our energy system.
We have to live according to natural law. Natural law doesn't bend to us. We bend to it. And I know that makes everyone mad at me. I don't make the rules. I just follow them. I tell you what it is and I follow them because she's unforgiving. Right? Nature is unforgiving. Right. If you bend those rules for too long, she will bite back and she'll bite back hard.
Exactly. Well, guys, we're going to get into so many of these concepts in very, very deep discussions here on the podcast. And so make sure you tune in. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And thanks, Dr. Rob, for agreeing to do this with me. This is going to be fun. If you guys really want to know the science and the pathway to achieve a healthier existence, make sure you tune in on every one of our podcasts here. Doc, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. Guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.